Brilliant. I think we've got some people starting to join us and dialing in. If you can find your way to the chat, it should be in your portal. Let us know where you're dialing in from. I've got a slight challenge here that this iPad has got volume up so I can hear myself, which nobody else wants to. It won't go completely silent. So maybe we'll have to ask people to bear with us whilst I pass that over to you guys to sort out. But if you can let us know where you're joining us from. I know that, John, you've travelled down. You haven't had the most easy of travel, but you managed to get plenty of work done on the way down, right?
Yeah, I made good use of the train delays that I suffered, which my PTs will thank me for.
Yeah, you said you managed to take out a big piece of work that hopefully ahead of schedule as a result of that, unlike the train, I guess, which is good.
Which, as long as the one tonight's not delayed, I'll be all right. Could do with getting back on time tonight.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll obviously let people come in. I can't see where people are joining us from at the moment, but hopefully from some interesting places across the country. We're down in slightly grey Bristol at the moment, aren't we? Not the nicest day, but still.
It's still warm.
Yeah, still warm.
Still warm.
We
and
can't
it only
complain.
rained a little bit this morning.
But we've been talking a lot today about lots of different things. You were just talking earlier about a previous podcast that you did in Italy, if I'm not mistaken, cooking in front of 2,000 people.
There was 2,000 on the call, and on the podcast when we did it live.
So a high pressure situation then, really.
Managed to not burn anything. And we all walked away with all of our fingers, so it was good.
It's good to see your passion for cooking was able to be shared on that large scale.
Yeah.
So something you still do. That's something you're still passionate about. You still get involved in. I know, obviously, you were in your previous role, Ask Italian, from an L&D perspective, but a passion from yours.
Hugely passionate about food and about that, even still the industry. Stepping away from it was just to reduce the travel down. Still hugely passionate about that industry, about everything food related, and it actually dovetails really nicely with fitness. Because, most fitness journeys, half of it's done in the kitchen. So,
I sadly know.
So do I, unfortunately.
But, unlike me, you managed to go and do a high rocks training session, didn't you?
I did, So, it's fun and games.
Good stuff. Well, look, I think we're ready to make a start. I think plenty of you are in the room. Hopefully you've managed to find the chat box section. Let us know where you're joining from. But I'd love to say welcome to the launch of Mind the Gap. We wanted to create a podcast for you in L&D and organisations across the globe to be able to help identify areas that you might want to fill gaps in knowledge and understanding, and hear from experts in their fields about challenges that they face and ways in which they've overcome those challenges. Our goal is to provide relevant insights and useful information on an ongoing basis. And I'm really excited to say that we're joined by Jon, who's head of L&D from Fitness First, to share a bit of the story in relation to that. Great to have you here, Jon.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And look, we've got lots to try and get through today. As you probably know, we've talked about it. We've tried to get a bit of an agenda that we hope is going to be really exciting for the audience. We want to thank everyone in the build-up to this for sending what actually turned out to be hundreds of questions to us on the way here around the challenges that they want to talk about. And so we've collated and got some of those questions together that we're going to explore today. And we'll try to get through as many of those as time allows, as well as, obviously, if there are live questions that people want to put into the chat, you're absolutely welcome to do that. But first, what I'd like to do, and a little bit of fun, is to get to know Jon a little bit more with some icebreaker, quick-fire questions. Yeah. What I'd also like to ask is maybe that people online join in and share maybe some of their answers to these questions, and purposely a few maybe that stir a little bit of debate, maybe even the way that I say them. So let's just start very easy. What was breakfast this morning, Jon? You said it was big.
Breakfast this morning was a full English and a Huel, and then there was a little pastry afterwards as well.
Good stuff. That's what we like to hear. Ready for this then. Favourite country to visit? Hopefully that's represented in the joiners today around the globe.
Short haul Italy, long haul Thailand.
Oh, nice. And we were just talking about Italy in terms of your experience there. I can understand from a culinary perspective. This is the one that might cause some level of debate. I say scone, but you might say scone, jam, then cream, or cream, then jam?
Jam, then cream.
You've got to tell us a little bit about why.
So if the scone is warm, the jam acts as a barrier between the scone and the cream, stops the cream from melting and some of the solids coming out of the cream. So, yeah,
Scientifically
that's the best
proven.
way to eat.
Scientifically proven. First job as a child, John.
Paperboy.
Oh, nice. Well, we could spend time talking about that, but I know I've got to keep moving on. The best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Comparison is the theft of joy.
Oh, wow. Nice. Again, we could spend a lot of time on that one. It'd be good to hear from other people online. I love that one. That's very strong. Favourite book?
One I read quite often, keep going back to, Ender's Game.
Okay. Are you happy to share a snippet about why you keep going back to it?
There's lessons you can learn about how to treat people in the way they should be treated. Even though it's a fiction book, there's a lot that can be taken from it.
I have to add it to the list. I have to admit, I haven't read it. Okay, one thing that you can't live without.
Can I have 3 things? Because it would be my partner and my 2 cats.
You're allowed to.
Okay.
And because they're particularly precious, you're allowed to have those things. We'll let you. Look, we're on our first Mind the Gap podcast, but your personal favourite podcast or one that you go to?
Oh, there's quite a few. I like the Ride Companion because I'm quite a keen mountain biker, so the Ride Companion's a good one. Love Off Menu as well. Obviously, the food element comes in there. Loads of different ones, but I do default quite a lot to comedy ones. Bit of levity in there.
Yeah, nice. Something just to be able to kind of put on in the background and switch off to. I think we all need that sometimes, don't we? Brilliant. Well, look, hopefully some fun answers in the chat online, and nice to get to know you a little bit more before we jump into the meat of the topic. So, as hopefully everyone knows, because you've signed up to the session today, it's about how we're going to reframe learning and development as a long-term investment rather than just a cost center. And that's really the focus of what we want to talk to today. I think there are lots of really interesting statistics, lots of different papers that have been written and surveys that have drawn this topic out. But there was one that jumped out to me that I specifically wanted to share. And that was from actually Emerald Works. And they said their survey said that only 8% of CEOs see the business impact of L&D, which is, for me, is sad. And especially sitting as a CEO of a business, I certainly don't feel like that. But the interesting contrast in this statistic is that 82% of L&D leaders see themselves as a strategic partner inside the organisation. So what we're seeing there is obviously a clear disconnect, really, in terms of that statistic, which is quite scary to me. And it'd be interesting, maybe, if you're happy to share a little bit of your thoughts in relation to that.
It's definitely a scary one, but I also think it's one that doesn't seem strange to me. I think the way learning and development is thought of within business would mean that the impact is seen as less tangible, because it's not something it's very hard to put it down on a report or add it into a KPI or something like that. It's actually something far less tangible, but it has bigger impacts on the way the business can run. And I think it's how you frame that in terms of, and I think this is why L&D leaders see themselves as strategic, because they frame it in terms of the impact it has in small parts, lots of small parts of the business. A CEO looks at it mainly from high level and says, well, we're spending all that money, what am I getting for it? And it's quite hard to marry those two things up. And I think that's where actually spending time actually engaging with the senior leaders in businesses and with key stakeholders and helping them to see that overall impact that it's having can go a really long way.
And we'll probably talk about a lot more about that and some of the journey that you've been on at Fitness First in helping draw the line between, business impact, ROI, and maybe what your CEO and senior leadership want. I think what would be good if we can ask in the chat box for people maybe to let us know in one word, how does your company view development? What's the feedback from individuals there? I need to just jump back into, I'm hoping, a working iPad now to be able to see some of the responses. Hey, we've got some people joining from Austin, Texas. That's close to my heart. I've only just seen that, having lived there for 3 years, so good to see that. Yeah, look, I think for me the big part is you're right. Sometimes some of it's intangible, right, and some of it's not necessarily completely clear. But there's definitely things that you've worked on, and I think we probably want to talk about a bit more alongside other people's comments. But there are elements that you can draw out that you can start to draw direct lines to benefit and business value, right? And that's where I think we want to spend a lot of the time talking today. Let me have a look. So we've got some really good ones here. Optional, a nuisance, nice to have, important but a cost, needed but not always prioritized. Capacity versus capability is always an issue for us. That's a really interesting one. Essential, some really good ones. In terms of your experience, are there any words that kind of jump out there? Maybe where you've been and where you've come to, or how you perceive it?
There's a few. The capability versus cost is jumping out from where I've been. I think that sort of almost sums up where I started almost, in terms of cost was always part of the conversation. The one that jumps out at me, I think the last one you said, was essential, because that's quite close to mine, which would be a necessity. Because actually now, if I think of my position in the business, we see development as something that is necessary and essential for our business to grow as we go forward. It's less about the cost of it and more about the impact of development.
Yeah, brilliant. And so for people that are feeling like nuisance and feeling like it's needed but not always prioritized, it sounds like you've been there before and felt
Definitely
like it's a journey that you've gone on. Do you think there's anything about the leadership or the organisation in terms of the way that training or development, capability development is perceived, and how you get the buy-in from a leadership perspective? Because I know you're very well supported in terms of your organisation at the moment.
Yeah, hugely. My organisation, definitely support development and support future thinking. And this isn't just to Fitness First. In I think every organisation I've worked in an L&D capacity, I've faced these sort of barriers. And I think it's just how you approach what the learning actually adds to the business. Learning will always be seen as a cost, because there is always a cost to it. But actually, it's what are you adding to the business? What are you going to get from it? Not just the business, but its employees. One of the things I've always lived by is I want people are going to leave the business. I know that happens in life, but I want them to leave in a better position than when they joined. Yeah. That's what we go for. And actually, there's direct parallels between people leaving in a better position than when they joined and the capacity and capability to do the jobs.
Yeah. There's one really interesting one here that I want to maybe just talk about. I think it feeds nicely into probably some of the other questions. There's one that's an individual here who said reactive problem solving to compensate for poor performance in other areas. I think that's really, the reactive piece for me is really interesting. I think that there's something that we've talked about before, where almost when you get into a new L&D role, you can get into a reactive process where you're like, I need to deliver training, I need to go and do this, I need to go and do this. And maybe you're not necessarily in that more strategic thinking of taking a step back and starting to really understand what's the priorities and where the business needs to focus.
And I've definitely got experience in that. When I joined Fitness First, it didn't actually have a learning and development department. I was tasked with restarting learning and development within the business. They'd been without it for sort of 4 or 5 years. And I fell into that reactive trap of, this is what we need, I'm going to go away and I'm going to build X, Y, and Z. We develop these processes, this is what we're going to do, without actually understanding the bigger picture. And taking that step back and understanding the bigger picture is what's got me to the place I am now. I pretty much scrapped everything I did in the first 6 months.
And that's quite scary, right, for people to probably feel or hear. But if you were to say to someone who's feeling that reactive place, I'm scrambling to do stuff because I'm hearing I need to do it, versus maybe stepping back, engaging with leadership, talking to the senior stakeholders, understanding the needs of the business, you had to be quite brave, I guess, in that first period of time to be able to go, I'm actually going to rip up what I started doing and actually kind of start again.
Yeah, and there was definitely some tough conversations in there around, I had to hold my hands up and say, look, we need to almost stop them. this is working, but it's not. It's working for right now. What we're not doing is building a pathway to our future. So yeah, that was when taking the step back and starting to talk to senior stakeholders and starting to talk to stakeholders in the business around what is the strategy and what skills do we need in the future to support that strategy. Because that's what my focus should be right now, is the future skills.
Yeah.
We know what skills we've got in the business, and we can, put courses out there that test people's knowledge of compliance all day long. But what we want to do is develop people's future skills. So to get to that point, we've got to talk strategically, and we've got to really think about what's the overall business strategy.
And when you say talk to, and this is the last bit probably before we move on to some of the really big questions that I know we've got to get into. When you say talk to, we're not talking about a survey at the end of a piece of paper or a document. You're physically in there talking to the people that you're working with, right?
Yeah, so and on all levels. So I'll physically go into a room with the senior leadership and talk to them about what they need from a learning perspective to develop their teams. I'll then go on an operational level and talk to the operators about what do you need on a level. I'll then go to our club staff and our PTs and talk to them about what do you need to help you achieve your job either more efficiently or to a better level, or to get to the next job that you want in your career. So yeah, it's about those face-to-face, almost whites of the eyes conversations around what can we do better to support you.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying surveys aren't helpful in building the picture, right? But the fact that you're going in and talking to people in person at those different levels as well is critical.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think surveys have their place, and I wouldn't ever pull back on surveying. I think it definitely adds something, but it's not the be all and end all. I actually think surveys will give you an amount of information, but you'll get a feeling from people when you're in the room with them. You don't get that from a page or a screen. Yeah. And you can tell if someone's being upfront and honest or if they're holding back.
Yeah.
So by having that really honest conversation, you can draw a lot more out of people, especially if they know it's a safe space and it's about creating for them in the future.
Yeah.
People will open up a lot more.
Yeah, there's loads of great questions and comments in the chat here that we could probably go into, but I know we've got some quite big topics from the 100 or so questions that we went into. There's one piece that I think is really interesting, and this is the idea I've just seen, leadership role modelling. I think that's a really nice thing that maybe we should talk to in maybe the next section. And if I'm able to just give my personal belief around this, if you're working in an organisation where there isn't the buy-in for continuous development and they're not role modelling it themselves, you're probably in a cultural challenge from the start, right? It feels like you need to have buy-in at the top, middle, bottom. And obviously, as an L&D leader yourself, you're talking about, I'm engaging with those people, understanding what they want to achieve and getting buy-in and through the process of engaging them and asking questions. But I do think there's something about getting that buy-in and getting the support. And if you're in an organisation where, let's say senior leadership don't even want to talk to you about it, that's a real challenge, right? And I think there are probably some people that feel like that, and getting a seat at the table can be a challenge too.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I've been fortunate in that actually my senior leaders now do see the value in what we're doing, and actually any learning that I develop, they complete as well as the club teams do.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So our senior leaders, it's not like it's alien to them what we're doing, because they actually complete all the learning. Whether that's a face-to-face course, whether that's an online course, they will go through it the same as the club team will. And I think that really helps them to understand the direction the learning is taking us into, and it understands what the expectation of our teams and clubs can be. By understanding what we're getting them to do on the day-to-day.
That's brilliant. I think that's true. That's true role modelling in terms of...
Yeah, I think the leadership have really bought into the fact that if they're going to lead, they need to know what they're leading.
Yeah. So, should we move on to the main event, I think? As I said, we've had over 100 questions. We've tried to filter down to a few that we think we can get into that are interesting to hopefully everyone. I know we haven't had time to really share them with you, so I'm going to get you to go off the cuff in terms of some of your responses. And And obviously, what we'll try to do is use any of the follow-up on any other time in the chat to be able to do that. So I've got to get a piece of paper here because they're quite big questions that we'll try and get into. So this first question says, I work for a company where most employees are billable. Leadership constantly reviews billable percentages and people want to protect their unbillable time for emergencies. How can I best demonstrate the value of training to participants? Participants see how it can positively impact their productivity. So my initial thought there is going to a law firm where I know it's billable hours and there's a lot of strict kind of oversight associated with that. But I'm pretty sure actually that relates quite well to your position too at Fitness First.
It definitely does, with a certain percentage of our population who are our personal trainers. They work on billable hours. So for those guys, we've got that very same challenge of actually they don't want to come to an hour-long training session because that's an hour that they can't charge a client for. So getting them to those sessions is how we sell them on that is we show them the future value. So we make sure it fits what they want and we show them how it can add to their business. Effectively, it is their own business. So we show them that it adds to that business. And we do that through various different medium. One is face-to-face conversation. Two is actually we've produced podcasts before where our CEO and our head of fitness have actually talked about what's coming up for these guys and we've sent it out to them so they know what's coming and they start to understand the impact and the value of an hour of time here will actually give you X amount of time over here because you'll get more efficient or better at doing a particular activity.
And I'm right in saying, from my understanding of our conversations in the past, that what you've centered that focus on is saying, look, there are some specific Fitness First capability that we need to develop, the skills and capability around classes, whatever it may be, making sure we keep our customers safe. But what you've also done is then looked at the PT role itself and said, actually, they're a business person in their own right. And even if they're a self-employed business person and they work for Fitness First, we need to help them develop the business acumen and understanding to be able to develop that business, develop the capabilities that aren't necessarily completely relevant to Fitness First, but are relevant to that person. And so the way that you've looked at it is almost to add value beyond just the Fitness First specific, right?
It's the piece of we want them to leave better than when they arrived, and actually that business knowledge, it's not specific to Fitness First as a business. Every PT in every gym in the country would follow that model of I run my business. The guidance we've given them is to hopefully make their business much more sustainable. It's a full program. It's a 9-month program of learning that they go through, and we talk to them about how you build a business, how you market a business, how you do your finances, all these things, and we feed fitness through it as our red thread. But actually, what we're doing is teaching them to be really efficient business people and understand the core of their own business. And once they do that, we start to see their businesses become more successful, which then supports Fitness First as a business. Because if the PTs are staying in business, they keep working with us, and it's self-perpetuating then.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about? I think it's probably quite relevant to go back to that phase then, because it feels like you've been on a real journey here in terms of getting to this place and understanding. But you said earlier you kind of failed fast and had to hold your hands up, I guess, right at the start, which is great. But can you tell us about what you did? And I believe, and I know because we've spoken about it quite a lot before, the conversations with finance to identify some of those kind of key value drivers and metrics that you want to, and how you then tied that together with this whole bigger picture of actually I can link what the business needs, what Fitness First needs, one of the core metrics we want to change, and then how we can ultimately develop our people and get them engaged and feel excited about doing that capability development.
And then that's been a huge driver of, once I realised the mistakes I was making, one of the big drivers was, right, well, what does the business need to achieve, and how, from a KPI level, what do we need to achieve, and how does our learning support that? One of the big ones was our attrition. Our staff attrition wasn't great when I started, and we knew we needed to focus in on that because we know that there's a cost to every employee that joins and leaves. Every business knows that there's costs associated. So by reducing our attrition, we reduce our cost of employment. And hopefully then we can reinvest that money into other areas of the business. Hopefully learning and development is what I would pitch for. But yeah, so we looked at the attrition figures and we said, well, what we need to do is make people feel like they are getting development towards their future career, not just completing compliance learning, which was what it was initially. It was, are we safe to open clubs? Do we have people who are responsible to, hold
stuff.
keys, things like that? So, we stepped back from that and said, right, well, what does our future development look like? How do we take someone new to fitness and give them the skills they need to develop into a fitness consultant and then eventually a PT and all these things? So we've structured programs around leadership and around internal development, and those have helped us reduce our attrition in year one. We've now got some fairly chunky KPIs to work on for the next few years in terms of getting our attrition to a point that we want to be industry leading. We want to be in a position where we actually keep hold of our staff, because that links directly to another KPI, which is our member attrition.
Yeah.
When you're in a club that's got a stable staff team, we know that members stay around longer as well, because they get to know the staff, they get to enjoy working out in a place where they know people, and so it starts to snowball. This, just us giving people development in their current roles starts to add KPIs at different levels across the business, and that for me is a really big boost in terms of getting people to buy into the development of our teams.
Yeah, and so what I love about that is you've gone and you've identified, originally the first place was PT attrition, but actually that has a direct correlation with your actual member attrition too, because there's such a trust relationship piece and accountability. But the actual path to both of those outcomes is developing the PT beyond the core of fitness first. It's developing them as an individual, it's developing them as a business person, it's developing them with the capability that means that they're going to have a successful business going forward, right? Yes. And so by doing that, they're staying, and then therefore your members are staying.
Yeah, everyone benefits. The members benefit, the business benefits, and the PTs benefit as well. So it works for everyone on all the levels that we've approached it at. And that's helped us also then see gaps in other parts of the business that we could take a similar approach to.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I won't spend too much time here, but one of the other podcasts that we're going to be launching later is with a law firm who has won some Investors in People awards, and also have gone through a very similar process to what you're talking about, in terms of they realised that actually to get people to engage, you need to give value beyond the core of the business. And so actually for a lot of their employees who might be new to the career space, or actually have been in it for a while, they're giving them life lessons around how to manage your mortgage, how to invest, how to do things like that, just trying to give them extra value that means that a platform or L&D aren't just seen as this compliance tick box kind of exercise process. But I love the way you've drawn that line from maybe going and just reacting and learning for the sake of learning, to I went and spoke to finance, I went and spoke to the operational leadership, I went and spoke to people on the ground floor, and you're able to start to draw the line between the different elements to get to, actually, if I develop these people in this way, we solve attrition of PTs and attrition of members. Yeah. And I know that you have, and we don't have to share them on the podcast, but you've now, because you've set up a motion in place now. You've now been giving you, and I think you set yourself a goal that you've obviously achieved in your first year. You've now got quite aggressive targets to keep moving that forward in year 2, year 3, etc.
Yeah, and the targets that I genuinely believe are achievable if we focus on the right areas of development and we focus on the right people to develop. I genuinely think we will hit those targets that we've set for ourselves, which are fairly chunky, but we like a challenge.
Yeah. And look, I guess kind of coming back to the question for us, and I don't know whether this is a law firm or not, it might be another similar organisation to yourself where they're self-employed individuals, but I guess there's that piece of trying to work out, is there additional value that you can drive to that individual that means that they've got a reason to come and do maybe some of the learning that's very organisational focused, but also is focused on developing that person too. Shall I keep going? Otherwise, we'll stay on that question for a long time. For us, L&D is a strategic priority. which is great to hear. But how do we reward and incentivize people to keep it there rather than letting it slip back into a compliance activity?
I think this goes back to what we've just talked about, is it's not just developing them the skills for their role, it's developing the skills for future as well, and actually see it as personal development, not just development in the job. If they see themselves developing personally, they'll buy into it a lot more, which will also make them happier in their jobs, which means they do the jobs better as well. So there's bigger knock-on effects in there as well. When people feel like you're investing in them, they are more likely to work more for you. But it is a trap that I've fallen into. I fell into it at the beginning, just going, no, it's about compliance, it's about compliance. And even now, a lot of the reporting I do is on compliance, which is, it's a necessary evil, but I'm starting now to draw reporting out on other areas of development as well, to show that what we've got in place as a development structure is actually working. So we're starting to pull those reports out as well and put those into people's hands so they can see more of how the investment in development affects people beyond how well they just do their job.
I think it's from speaking to a lot of our customers and generally in the space, I think it's a challenge. But I think the big bit for me to say is the offer of development that's personalised and relevant to the individual is actually, if you look at statistically, I believe 94% of people leave an organisation because of lack of development. So there's a couple of things. We actually talked about it a little bit earlier. It's like, as an organisation, is it a case of we have to develop people? Yes, we do, but we have to help. But there's also the individual has to want to develop themselves too, and there's a cultural thing and a space and time, and again, it goes back to leadership piece there probably too. But I think having that physical development available is actually part of the incentive, and actually giving people time to spend on development too is an important part of it.
And letting them pick their own development as well. We've got a certain amount of structure and say you have to do this for your role, but actually then we're going to offer all of this on the side, and you pick what the area that you want to develop in. Giving them that freedom of choice allows them to then almost shape their own career a little bit. It doesn't feel like they're being pigeonholed. They're able to go in a direction that they want to go in. I think giving people options around development drives that want to develop.
Seeing different skills pathways, levels, areas to go into, which obviously we could probably spend ages talking about too. I'm going to keep going, otherwise we won't be able to get through lots of these questions. This one's interesting. We're always balancing capability and capacity. I think it came up a bit earlier in the chat as well. How can we market L&D as an investment and ensure minimum attendance on programs? And ensure minimum attendance on programs despite inevitable dropout rates. I think that should be maximum attendance, probably, not minimum. So. Otherwise they'd be upset. But maybe that's just a typo.
This is something I've been through. So capacity and capability are always interesting conversations because for me they are intrinsically linked. You can't pull them apart because someone's capacity to do what they're doing is based on the capability of that task. So it might take someone who's brand new to fitness, if I use fitness example, if they're working in a pool site, might take them 40 minutes to do the water tests in one of our swimming pools. Whereas someone who's been doing it for 20 years can do it in 10 minutes. So for me, actually developing the capability reduces the need for capacity. And that's how I've always pitched it, is actually, well, if you need 4 people to do that one job, if you train 2 people to a much higher level and develop their skills to a higher level, you get the same output from 2 people. So that's how you start to, it's essentially you have to front load a lot of your development and say, well, we are going to spend more on labour now, but in the future, because we're developing capacity now, in the future we can reduce our labour spend.
Can I ask?
And our capacity goes up.
Yeah.
And capability goes up, our capacity comes down. It's,
Can I ask? Because I imagine people will be like, okay, I'd love to be able to do that, but how do I start that conversation, or how do I get people to buy into that process?
Being very upfront and honest. And it actually, mine started with just spending time on the club floors, looking at what people were doing and finding out how long it took them to do, with different people at different levels. And then figuring out a process of, well, this is the process and this is how long it should take. How far away from that are we? And that's our gap that we're going to try and fill.
Yeah.
So once we've got that as a deck of evidence, effectively, as saying this is how long it should take, this is how long it is taking, here's the gap we're going to fill. Then we come up with a strategy of development of, okay, so we need to fill this gap. This is going to be our development process and our learning process. We're going to give it a time scale, so we effectively stick into SMART as our planning process, because everyone buys into that. Once we give it a time scale, we've then set our deadline of, we will get done by then. By this point, we know that all of these tasks can be done in this time. So we've set ourselves a KPI and a deadline, and we've got a process to get to that. And I think that, especially with some of the operators that I've worked with, not just in Fitness First, in other businesses, that's where I've got the buy-in, because they're very used to, what's my KPI, what's my process, how am I going to do it?
And that proof point, that kind of starting with the evidence to prove, and starting small, and then starting to, once you've got that proof point and you know that you can deliver against it, I imagine that conversation becomes easier and easier as you go through the rest of the business. Or
yeah, it does. There's always the difficult conversations where the process is less defined, and that's always going to be a much trickier conversation. But where we can define those elements, the conversation does become a little bit easier, because you can put it almost in a format that everyone in the room understands already, because you've done it once. So once that format is set and you've almost got your template for how I'm going to introduce development to the business, that then becomes a little bit easier. It's then just about engaging the right key stakeholders to do with that area of development.
Yeah. Again, one that we probably could, I think for a lot of people, building the framework to actually be able to execute against it is probably something that would be really interesting, in terms of having a toolkit to be able to take and roll out continuously in terms of organisations to be able to get those proof points. But again, that's probably a whole nother...
That's a big conversation. I think you could do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah. This one's quite interesting, because I think that, again, interesting shift in terms of some of the narrative in the industry around managers, but how can we show managers the benefits of an LMS and how it can support them in managing their team's performance?
That's an interesting one. I actually had a much easier time in my current role with this one, because managers were crying out for some data about their teams. But in my previous business, it was more about showing them that the LMS isn't just about compliance, it's about developing your team. So, and this is where actually the direction that Kallidus itself has gone in has been great, because the skills that you've now introduced, my previous platform, in my previous business, I use that a lot, because that's what the managers would buy into. Because actually we could use those skills profiles and say, well, my pipeline of talent coming through, these are the skills that I need to focus on for development. Yeah. So these are the development areas that I can talk about with them, because I know where the gap is. And once you have identified that gap as a manager, you can then start to drive your own team's pipeline of succession, and you can feel like you've got control. And what I find is most of our managers just want to feel like they're in control. So once they've got that in front of them and they can start to see how the platform shows them the gaps, they start to buy into it, and they start to see the tool that it is for developing not just the team but themselves as well, and developing a full pipeline of succession for future planning.
I appreciate you talking about Kallidus there in a positive light, so thank you. But I think from me personally, especially, and I'm going to just plug a book that's quite interesting called Power to the Middle, which has changed. It's interesting. A load of McKinsey consultants have basically gone against the thing of removing middle managers and saying, actually, no, you need to invest in your middle management, because they are going to drive the success of a lot of your capabilities as an organisation. But one of the things that you just said there, and for us passionately, it is a case of just giving the tools and capability to the manager, making sure they've got visibility of what's going on, and actually the key part is you've got to remember a manager is typically wearing multiple hats. And a lot of our managers in a lot of our organisations are actually individual contributors and managers. So they're doing, they're having to balance all of that, consume a lot of information. So the big driver for us from an organizational perspective is realizing that, give them the information in a very easy to digest way, allow them to take action, make it easy to take action, and be able to give them activities to be able to move and support moving things forward within the LMS. But again, probably something that is more relevant for you to be able to speak about than me in terms of our passion for it. But I think that focus on the manager is important.
Yeah. Managers need to feel like they can run their own club, their own team, and by giving them the right tools to do that, they do feel that way. They feel empowered to actually start to drive development on their own without me sending mass emails out and sending reminders out and things. Actually, what I'm finding is managers are now coming to me and saying, when's the next this or this coming out, because I want to do it with these people. So
they're putting you under pressure now.
Well, that for me is the nice switch, though. I'd rather be under that level of pressure.
Yeah.
And I'd rather be them coming to me and saying, we want more development, rather than me banging the drum to try and get them to do what's out there currently.
Yeah. So let's move on to another question. This is, I think, probably really relevant to probably a lot of organisations or individuals on the call, but this is actually specific to the education sector. Budgets are tighter than ever in education. Senior leaders often see training as the first thing to cut, yet I believe it's one of the most important areas to continue investing in. How can I demonstrate ROI, especially when year-on-year data comparisons are unreliable due to external factors?
This is one I've got some experience in, definitely, especially the data not being comparable year on year due to external factors. That's definitely true of not just fitness, but the hospitality industry as well. Things change so rapidly that it's really difficult to compare year on year. So one of the things I've started to do is look at a role in the last 12 months rather than just year on year, and start to look at trends. But I'll also link the learning as much as I can to one of our strategic pillars in the business. Yeah. We've got our strategic pillars that we're working on as a business. So my job is to almost take the learning and how does it link to one or all of those pillars, and how will it support the future development of the business through our overall strategy.
Yeah, and it feels like to me in that respect, and I appreciate, businesses, organisations, educational institutions, they're constantly changing, transforming, but it feels like some of those strategic pillars feel like they stay fairly similar. Some of the key KPIs or challenges across organisations, there will be some things, and there are some standard ones like attrition, like other things that you can obviously hang your hat on and try to go after and draw the line in terms of the impact and outcome. I guess the key thing is the buy-in and alignment with leadership, that is the right focus. And so that, for me, again, it almost goes back to, unless I'm mistaken, that conversation that you ended up having after maybe jumping in and then coming back and starting to talk to finance, starting to talk to leadership, starting to really get involved there.
Yeah, it is. It's that you've almost got to have a slightly different conversation with each department because it relates to them slightly differently, but it's about just being upfront with where you are now and where the learning's going to take you. Getting buy-in it's always difficult because it's seen as a cost. Even just the language of, well, what does that cost? What's that going to cost the business? Whereas I've actively tried to change the language around development in fitness first to the investment. So, when I go to finance and say, we're going to be going out and doing this training, we're going to hit every club, the investment we're going to make is X amount of money. So just trying to reframe the way they think of it by using different language has started to help me get buy-in. Because actually, if we start to see it as an investment, that's when the question comes back is, well, what's our expected ROI?
Yeah.
Or where will we see the ROI? Is it in better customer service? Is it in better member attrition? Is it in lower staff attrition? But I can hang the ROI then on one of the pillars by approaching it in the right way and just using the right language when I'm talking to the senior leadership.
Yeah. The other thing that I think that has been a conversation, not necessarily or necessarily between us, but certainly with other L&D leaders, would be that actually, budgets can often be small or even be shrinking in some organisations. So actually trying not to go too broad and narrowing down to that core strategic focus and say we're impacting this thing and we can draw the line to the value and the outcome, that becomes your business case for future investment.
Yeah.
And it might be a case of the cycle of the business, the funding, whatever, that might be further out. But when it's the right time, you've got the proof points. You know that you're impacting something that is strategic, something that is important to the leadership and the stakeholders across the business.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's just understanding almost your red thread through the business and where learning sits within the current priorities of the business. And you've got to have a strategy as a learning professional to change that view of learning throughout the business. And it's quite a tough one. Depending on the business you're in as well, budgets can be really tight. I've been in that position where, we've been almost pulled back on everything just to keep the budgets in line. And that's when you feel quite constrained. And that's when you've almost got to get a little bit creative and start to think outside of the box. And that's where, you go back onto your training and you start to think about the various books you've read and how you then get creative with a limited budget in terms of introducing small amounts of development. And once you can show the impact in that, you make a case for next year increasing the budget by a percentage. And it's just about...
It is about it's proof, isn't it? Yeah. Everyone wants to see proof. Everyone wants to see some data, picking something narrow and then showing the impact and then maybe going slightly bigger. And it's easy for us to talk about it theoretically, but there are obviously some examples. That I think probably we need to go and have a look at, see where some of the questions that are in the chat. I need to make sure we're covering some of those. Let's have a look. There's a question here saying, can you explain how your platform emphasizes the need for clean, consistent data and uniform naming conventions and how that contributes to skill building, automation and reliable reporting? That's quite a big question.
It is, and I'm in a very fortunate position in that actually within the business I'm in, role naming conventions are very simple, and we've actually got very few roles that are named. But actually, yes, in previous businesses, one of the things in terms of data is, any programmer would know, crap in, crap out is the phrase. So actually understanding, and I started with a HR system and said, actually, what are our role names? How are they defined here? How are they defined on the payroll system? Can we just bring that across, or do we need to tweak that before we then bring data across to start to build reports in our learning platforms? And sometimes you do need to do a little bit of a cleanup of HR data before you can start really drilling into very concise, clean reporting. There's always going to be odd outliers as well. We find that with PTs because we've got two different variants, some that are employed, some that are self-employed, but they're still a PT. So that then causes slight confusion in our data, but we just renamed one of the roles. Just clean reporting is actually a bit of a task in itself. And in terms of, again, I would almost sit down and work out a strategy of exactly what do you want to report? What do you want to show people? How are you going to build that in reports? And then what's the data that supports that and how clean is it at the moment? And it might be that there's a bit of a task to clean up data to get yourself to a point where you can cleanly report.
Yeah, and look, you're right, in terms of good data in, good data out, and the reporting side of things is absolutely critical. I think from a skills perspective, something that we've obviously tried to work on really cleanly is helping with a lot of the automation, and that's one of the great things that AI is able to do in the platform. It helps link skills to profiles. You can do auto up leveling, you can do tagging of content with skills. So as long as that you're right though, the underlying data still needs to be right. There's a lot of automation that we can drive to make the skills journey a lot quicker than it used to be in terms of creating a taxonomy and doing all of that. But again, we always say 90% of the way there. The reality is you still need that human intervention to be able to just oversee, make sure it's correct, etc. from a platform perspective.
And I think the thing I don't lose sight of is thinking about the individual, because it's great that we've got the reporting, we've got skills mapped to roles, but actually I still think about the individual, and I would still have a conversation around, well, the system says this is what you need to work on, but actually I know you and I know we can drop that bit because you're actually good at it, you're just not good at showing it.
So you can go and put in, you can change
we
the
would
level, you can manually
change
go and
something else.
intervene. And I think that's important, right? And for the manager as well, to have visibility of that and be able to intervene.
Yeah.
And we've obviously built in the kind of ability to auto update a skill based on completion of training, but also we've got the ability to, for a manager to go and sign off, or a subject matter expert to go and sign off and say that skill or capability has been up-leveled. I want to make sure we get through some more of the questions that have come through. I've got to make sure there's a few launched. This one comes from Walter. Have you implemented all the new AI developments in L&D? Role play, explain to a friend, present, coach, creating goal plans, etc.
I've implemented some, definitely, with AI. I see AI as a good tool to help us develop content within programs and things like that. I still, the actual core of my content isn't developed by AI. That is me, that is my team, that is leaders within the business saying this is what content we need. Certain sections like role plays and things definitely use some AI to help build scenarios, stuff like that. I think that use of AI, I think is great and I think can really add. I think I'm a little bit careful on how much I lean on AI. I'll use it a lot for generating images and things like this. The sort of almost the work that I would normally wait for because I'd have graphic designers doing it. I can now do that. I can streamline that workflow in terms of we can use a bit of AI. We've got our business prompts.
It's really interesting. It's 80% of AI projects are failing according to a recent RAND study. So that again goes back to the whole piece for everyone. Start with the outcome, understand what you're trying to achieve. Does AI play a part in solving that problem? Where does it fit? And that's how we're thinking about it at an organisational level rather than just sticking AI in to say we've got AI.
Yeah, for me, it's a tool that can be used, but it's a tool in the box. It's not the only tool in the box. And I think the temptation is to rely on it a little bit too much. And I always default to AI can't create anything brand new. It creates from what's gone before, so it'll always be based on something else. So if I need to create anything brand new, I definitely can't lean on AI for that. But yeah, we use it, but not sparingly, but consciously, I would say, is our use of it.
Yeah. Look, I think we probably haven't got much time for maybe any more big questions. Otherwise, we'll eat up another hour. I think hopefully we've managed to get into some of the topics. I think specifically for me, the journey that you've been on at Fitness First, and I hope we've managed to share some of that. Going from maybe jumping in and reacting to being much more programmatic, thinking about the strategic outcomes at an organisational level, engaging with those individuals and starting to draw. I love that, and the red thread is obviously aligned with the fitness first colour red, the red thread going through everything to make sure you understand. But what I love, and I hope can be one of the big takeaways from this, is that idea of trying to identify, actually, we've got a load of humans that are working for our organisations. They've got their own lives, needs, development that they're passionate about, and trying to fulfill some of that alongside what the company needs is an important parallel to draw in terms of the type of training that you're delivering.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance that needs to be struck. You've got to remember that the people want development, but that's also got to support the business strategy. And I think that balance is a tough one to strike at times. But I think there's real value if you can get to the point of you hitting a sweet spot. There's real value in there.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're on that journey, which is really exciting to hear. So hopefully we can do maybe a check-in in the future to hear about how the next level of attrition has gone. But I guess want to say a big thank you to the audience, to everyone that's joined us for the launch of Mind the Gap with Jon. A huge thank you to you, Jon, for spending the time with us. It's great to hear the story.
Thank you for inviting me and including me. It's been an honour.
No, well, it's great to have you. And I know that you've obviously got your check-in with our team tomorrow to look at some of our new capability.
Yeah.
And for everyone else online, we'll be launching our podcast from July 29th, our first episode. And if you've liked what you've heard and you want to keep hearing from Kallidus in terms of thought leadership, elements that we're bringing out, the podcast, new capability, and we're constantly sharing existing customer stories, please follow us on LinkedIn. We'd love to have you come along on the journey. But from there, we'd love to say a big thank you and hopefully see you and speak to you all soon. Thank you for the great questions. We can wrap up there.